people ask me why I do what I do. You see, I've had a career spanning getting on for 30 years in IT project management, program management, running program offices and running a couple of different businesses. And when people ask me that question, obviously there's a couple of key points in my life that determine why I do what I do. But I actually want to take you back, come back with me to 2009. And we sat in an office here in Wolverhampton, and this office is at the top of a factory, and we sit down in a big leather sofa. You know, one of those sofas that exude honesty, integrity. You know, it's part of the makeup of our business. And in front of me is the big oak captain's table. And there, sat behind the table, is the owner of the business. His name's John. And sitting there, we can hear in the background the hubbub of the traffic outside, people in the factory, and the sun streaming through the window because it's a beautiful spring day. And this time of the year, it's May in 2009. It's particularly important for me because it's in May that my wife and I got married. So I always notice the weather more in May than I do at any other time. And I've been called into that office and my mind's racing because I'm not sure what's going to happen. Now, just a few months earlier, this man, John, after a series of meetings, had said to me, Chris, I want you to run this business. I don't want a consultant. I don't buy and I don't hire consultants. I want you to run this business as the managing director. And he said to me, he said, Philippa has told me about your credentials. And if she says you're the right man for the job, I trust her. And for me, you're the right man. So as we sit there, and I wonder what's happening, I see on the desk a white envelope. And in my world, in business, white envelopes usually mean one of two things. It's either a pay rise, and bearing in mind, John had just asked me when I started up this business, he said to me, name your price. You tell me what you want to run this business. So I was pretty sure it wasn't going to be a pay rise, and the only other possibility was the other end of the spectrum, because I know what's about to happen. So John sat back in his chair and he did one of those things, you know, where people put their hands behind them and they lean back and they look and stare at you. And that's exactly what John did. And his eyes were piercing across that table at me. And he picked up the letter and he handed it to me. But he made sure that our hands never engaged at the same time with the letter. And I picked it up and opened it. And in this letter, John laid out his terms and his new conditions, because it was his belief that he'd been overpaying me, despite asking me what I wanted. It was his belief that I was a salesman and he'd hired a salesman, when in actual fact, he'd hired somebody to develop a business and build a brand. And in this letter, he laid down his terms and conditions, which meant that I should work for the next 4 months without any salary. Now, you can imagine, I have a family to feed, I have a mortgage to pay, I have expenses and bills to pay. So given that circumstance, what would you do? What would you do in that circumstance? Because my mind was made up. And I picked the letter up and I said to John, thank you very much, I'll be in touch. My mind was made up, absolutely crystal clear. And I walked out of that office with my business integrity, my honesty, my own personal values around business intact. What happened next completely took me by surprise though, because I started to listen to that internal dialogue, you know, the self-talk. And it's like the little person on the back tapping you on the shoulder saying, hey Chris, who do you think you are that you can run a business for a multimillionaire? You're just an IT project manager that's run your own consultancy. Who do you think you are? Now, the big problem was that I actually started to believe myself, and I got to the point where I felt that I'd got nowhere to go. I'd reached the end of my rope, and I really didn't know what to do. Help was at hand though, because I knew somebody that could help me. Now, this was a life coach that I'd met, and not only did Claire enable me to get rid of that self-destructive mindset, what she taught me completely blew me away. And I was so enamored with it that I actually went off and learned how to do the same myself. And gradually I started to build life back. I started to build my business. We secured a small piece of work with a local authority. I did some work for a contact I had on program assurance. And then I secured a long-term piece of work delivering another IT project. So gradually things started to get better. But the pivotal point for me was one day in around 2012 when I was on Skype to my coach, my mentor and friend in the USA, and I'll just call him Jeff. You know who you are, Jeff. And at this point I just secured a piece of work which lasted for nearly 2 years, and for me personally was worth around £250,000. And so Jeff said to me, he said, "Tell me, Chris, what made the difference?" He said, you'd got to the point of despair where there was nowhere to go. You could see no way up. What's the one thing that made the difference? And I thought, and I said, "You know what, Jeff? The one thing that enabled me to rebuild life was mindset. It was being able to change my mindset from that negative, destructive one into one where I believed I can actually go out and achieve anything that I wanted to achieve." And the rest, as they say, is history. I've never been in that position again. Whenever anything happens, I'm able to rebuild and move forward. So that's my story about why I do what I do and why I focus so much on mindset. Now, obviously, if you want to find out more about that, about how I work, about what I can help you with, how I can help you, just go to the section on this website and it says Discovery, and book a discovery session with me, and we'll explore what sort of problem you're dealing with or what it is you want to achieve, and how we can work together and how I can help you.